William the Crown Prince has been fighting a private battle that finally broke him. Behind his calm smile and perfect duty, he was slowly falling apart. His family watched it happen, powerless to stop it. What heartbreaking struggles has William been hiding from us? Stay tuned as we reveal the devastating reality. The morning the crown cracked. The announcement hit newsrooms across Britain while most of the country was still waking under a cold December sky. At exactly 6:47, the official Kensington Palace statement appeared on screens with no warning, no build-up, no carefully choreographed press conference to soften the blow. Just a stark clinical sentence confirming what insiders had feared for months, but never dared say aloud. Prince William, the future king, the steady hand meant to guide the monarchy through its most uncertain era, was struggling. The reaction was immediate and visceral. In Manchester, a commuter waiting for the early train stared at her phone and whispered, "Not William. Anyone but William." In Glasgow, a retired teacher sitting with her morning tea felt her throat tighten as she read the words a second time, hoping they might change. Across London, where the pale winter sun had barely begun to rise, people stopped mid-step, processing the impossible. The one royal who had always seemed composed, controlled, ready for anything, had reached a breaking point. Within minutes, BBC interrupted its morning programming. Sky News pulled in royal correspondents who looked visibly shaken as they tried to explain what this meant. ITV anchors spoke in hushed tones, the kind reserved for national tragedies. Because in many ways this felt like not a death, not a scandal, but the quiet collapse of someone the entire institution had come to depend on. Across the Atlantic, where it was just past midnight, American networks scrambled to update their late-night coverage. CNN's breaking banner read simply, "Palace confirms William struggling." CBS anchors exchanged worried glances before addressing the camera. For older American viewers who remembered Diana's sons as grieving children walking behind their mother's coffin, the news carried a particularly painful resonance. William had always been the strong one, the protector, the future. Seeing that image crack felt deeply unsettling. But what made the announcement truly extraordinary wasn't just its content. It was its timing and tone. The palace rarely admits vulnerability, especially regarding senior working royals. The institution had spent centuries perfecting the art of appearing unshakable, even when crumbling inside. Yet here, on a cold December morning, Kensington Palace had done something almost unprecedented. It told the truth. The statement was brief, carefully worded, but unmistakably honest, following a period of sustained personal and institutional pressure. The Prince of Wales will be reducing his schedule to prioritize his health and family well-being. No spin, no euphemisms, no claim of routine adjustments, just a plain acknowledgement that William, after months of carrying impossible burdens, could no longer maintain the pace. Inside Buckingham Palace, senior staff who had been briefed the night before, moved through the morning with a somber efficiency. They had prepared for public shock, for media speculation, for the inevitable questions about what this meant for the monarchy's stability. But even they seemed affected by the weight of what had just been confirmed. One longtime aide, stepping into the cold December air for a brief moment of privacy, was overheard saying quietly, "We asked too much of him. We all knew it and we asked anyway." At Windsor, where King Charles had spent a sleepless night wrestling with the decision to allow the announcement, the mood was heavy with a father's guilt. Charles understood institutional necessity better than most. He had spent his entire life preparing to be king, learning to balance personal needs against public duty. But watching his son, the heir he had raised to carry this same burden, finally admit he couldn't bear it alone, struck something deep and painful inside him. Princess Anne, who had been among the first to recognize how dangerously thin William had stretched himself, felt a grim vindication mixed with genuine sorrow. She had warned repeatedly that the structure was unsustainable, that placing so much weight on one person, no matter how capable, would eventually lead to collapse. She took no satisfaction in being right. Queen Camilla, who had watched William transform from grieving teenager to beautiful prince to overwhelmed future king, spent the morning in quiet reflection. She understood better than most what it meant to be trapped between personal struggle and public expectation, and she knew that admitting weakness within the royal system took a kind of courage the outside world rarely recognized. By mid-morning, the global conversation had intensified. Social media filled with concern, speculation, and an unexpected outpouring of empathy. Hashtags trended across platforms. Mental health advocates praised the palace for its transparency. But beneath the supportive messages ran a darker current of worry. If William, the pillar of stability, was struggling, what did that mean for the monarchy itself? The truth, though the palace would never say it so bluntly, was that this moment had been building for far longer than anyone outside the institution realized, and understanding why it arrived now on this cold December morning required looking back at the months that had slowly, inexorably pushed the future king to his breaking point. The weight no one saw accumulating. To understand how Prince William reached the point where the palace had no choice but to intervene publicly, we must step back through the months that preceded this December morning. Months that appeared from the outside to be business as usual, but inside the walls of Kensington Palace and Windsor Castle told a very different story. A story of accumulating pressure, silent sacrifices, and a man trying desperately to be everything the monarchy needed him to be. The strain began building long before anyone noticed, arguably as far back as early 2024 when Catherine's health crisis first emerged. In January, when she underwent abdominal surgery and retreated from public life for months, William's world shifted fundamentally. Overnight, he became not only the working royal carrying forward the Wales family's duties, but also the primary caregiver at home, the emotional anchor for 3 children, processing their mother's illness and the public face of calm reassurance. He handled it the way he had been trained to handle everything, quietly, efficiently, without complaint. Staff at Kensington Palace watched him arrive earlier each morning, his schedule packed with engagements he could no longer postpone. Between official duties, he slipped away to be with Catherine, to shield George, Charlotte, and Louis from the worst of the anxiety, to project normally when everything inside him felt anything but normal. Those close to the family noticed small changes. William's usual easy humor grew more restrained. His patience normally steady, occasionally frayed at the edges during planning meetings. He stopped taking lunch breaks, working straight through the day before rushing home. But he never slowed down, never asked for help, never suggested that the load might be too heavy. Then came the second blow. King Charles's cancer diagnosis, announced publicly in February, added another crushing layer. Suddenly, William wasn't just supporting Catherine and managing his own duties. He was stepping into the void left by his father's reduced schedule, taking on additional constitutional responsibilities, attending meetings and briefings that would normally fall to the monarch, all while maintaining the fiction that everything was under control. Princess Anne saw it first. During a private meeting in late March, she studied William across the table and recognized something she had seen before in her own mirror during difficult years. The particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from physical tiredness, but from emotional depletion, the look of someone running on duty alone with nothing left in reserve. She mentioned it carefully to Charles, who was dealing with his own health battles and the emotional weight of watching both his wife and daughter-in-law navigate serious illness. Charles listened with growing concern, but he too felt trapped. The institution needed William functional. There was no alternative plan, no backup heir who could carry the weight if William stepped back. By late spring, as Catherine began her cancer treatment, the pressure intensified further. William now faced the impossible task of being publicly optimistic about his wife's prognosis while privately terrified of the outcome. Staff reported seeing him late at night, still at his desk, working through briefing papers after spending the evening with his family, determined not to let either responsibility slip. The summer brought no relief. Catherine's appearance at Trooping the Colour in June, though celebrated publicly as a positive sign, required enormous coordination behind the scenes. William managed every detail, protective to the point of exhaustion, ensuring she felt supported while shielding the children from excessive media attention. The effort took a toll no camera captured. Throughout this period, something else was happening that few outside the innermost circle understood. William was absorbing the emotional weight of everyone around him. Catherine leaned on him through her darkest moments. Charles confided his own health fears. The children needed reassurance that their mother would recover. Staff looked to him for stability as the institution navigated its most uncertain period in decades. And William, trained since childhood to be the steady one, the reliable one, the future king who never breaks, accepted every burden without protest. By autumn, the cracks were becoming harder to hide. During a September engagement, a longtime royal correspondent noted that William seemed distracted, his responses shorter than usual, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Palace aides dismissed it as fatigue from a busy schedule. But inside Kensington Palace, the staff knew better. One October evening, a senior advisor found William still working at nearly midnight, surrounded by papers related to constitutional matters, charity briefings, and family medical updates. When gently asked if he needed anything, William simply shook his head and kept reading. The advisor left deeply unsettled, recognizing the signs of someone running on empty but unable to stop. Catherine, recovering but still fragile, began noticing changes too. Her husband, normally present and engaged at home, seemed increasingly absent even when physically there. His mind was always somewhere else, always planning, always worrying, always trying to hold together the multiple fracturing pieces of their lives. The breaking point began forming in early November, though no single moment caused it. Instead, it was the accumulation, the months of being strong for Catherine, the constitutional weight of supporting his father, the parental responsibility of protecting 3 children through crisis, the institutional pressure of representing a monarchy under intense global scrutiny, the personal grief of watching his wife fight cancer while keeping his own fear hidden. By mid-November, those closest to William began using a word they had avoided for months: unsustainable, and said it first during a family meeting. Camilla echoed it days later. Even Charles, still recovering himself, finally acknowledged what everyone else had been too afraid to voice. William was carrying too much for too long with too little support. The final straw came in late November during what should have been a routine briefing. William sat through an hour-long discussion about next year's engagements, listening to plans that assumed his limitless availability, his endless capacity, his permanent strength. When the meeting ended, he stood, walked to the window, and for the first time in anyone's memory, admitted out loud that he didn't know how much longer he could continue at this pace. It was that admission, quiet and devastating, that set in motion the events leading to December 21st. Because once William finally acknowledged his struggle, the people who loved him realized they could no longer stand by and watch him break. When the palace could no longer look away, the turning point came not in a grand confrontation, but in a series of quiet observations that accumulated until they could no longer be ignored. Princess Anne, with her decades of experience reading the subtle shifts in royal dynamics, was the first to formalize her concerns. It happened during a cold morning in early December at Windsor Castle in one of the smaller private drawing rooms where sensitive family matters were traditionally discussed away from staff ears. Anne had requested the meeting with Charles, and her tone left no room for the usual deflections. She arrived carrying a folder unusual for someone who typically relied on memory and instinct. Inside were notes from conversations with Kensington Palace staff, observations from recent family gatherings, and a timeline showing William's schedule over the past 6 months. The document painted a picture that was impossible to dismiss. "He's functioning," Anne said, setting the folder on the table between them.